ahead.
All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us this morning. Before we get started, I just want to make sure that everyone knows to keep their microphones on mute. I'm sure you've heard that a bunch. We are recording the session, I believe, yes. So you can revisit it on the college's YouTube, or if you know other people who are thinking about the program and you want to share the video with them, you can do that as well. Any questions that you have, you can submit them via the chat feature and we will answer them later on in the session. We have a dedicated portion for that. But my name is Alexis Reciapa. I'm a junior at the colleges. I'm from Clinton, New York. I am a double major in political science and English, a public policy minor, and I am also in the teacher education program at the colleges. I am here today with Sydney Hummel, my classmate and associate professor and chair of the political science department, Stacy Filbrick-Yadav. Sid, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, of course. Hi, everyone. I'm Sydney Hummel. I am also a junior at HWS. I'm from Fort Myers, Florida. I am currently double majoring in political science and religious studies, and I'm really excited that you all have turned in today to hear about this program at HWS. So to get the conversation started, Professor Filbrick-Yadav, would you mind telling us a little bit about your own background, your research, any projects that you've been working on?
Sure. So I'm really glad that people could join for this too. I'm often not super available to do admissions events because I'm often teaching, right? But it's nice to be able to do this. So I've been at the colleges for 13 years. As you said, I'm an associate professor and I'm currently the chair of political science. But I also contribute to the International Relations Program faculty and chair the minor program in Middle East Studies. So I can actually answer questions from across that range. And I'm also currently chairing the Committee on Global Education. As I'm sure you know, HWS is an absolute leader in global education and study abroad. And I've participated in, led, and accompanied different abroad programs over the years too. They fit beautifully into the political science and international relations curriculum, but it's also something that most students on campus take part in, regardless of their major. So in terms of my own background, I started out at a liberal arts college, just like you're considering right now. I'm a graduate of Smith College, and I was a double major in anthropology and Middle East studies. And when I went to graduate school, I decided that I was most interested in politics, which is something that anthropologists study too, right? But that I thought maybe I wasn't 100% sure if I wanted to be a professor, and that a political science PhD might be more transferable skill, right? To some extent, that didn't end up mattering because I did become a professor and I do like being a professor, but as both Alexis and Sydney know, I also do policy relevant research. I specialize in the politics of Yemen, and you can see behind me, that's a coffee sack that crossed the blockade, the Saudi blockade of Yemen during the ongoing civil war. And I recently brought the importer to campus to talk about the ethics of sourcing commodities in conflict zones. And so that's sort of a way in which my research in Yemeni politics connects to the kind of classes that I teach, the kind of stuff that I do on campus. That was actually with my intro class, not with a Middle East politics class even. Sydney and Alexis, I know from my political violence course. So I kind of teach classes across that spectrum, both regionally focused and more generally focused on questions of conflict and peace and reconstruction. In terms of my research, over the summer, I was in Ethiopia helping to organize a field-based project in Yemen on the role of non-combatant actors in supporting the peace process. And that just came out about a month ago, our research. So being able to do original field-based research during the Civil War is a challenge. I was not able to physically go, but I was able to design it and work with the people who did the field-based component. So that's a little bit about me, and I'm happy to take questions and from Sydney and Alexis, but from any of you who are here to talk about the curriculum, to talk about what people do before or what people do during and after their course of study in political science, etc.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. So I've been, as you said, I'm lucky to have you as both my academic advisor and you've taught me in courses as well. And we're going to have another course together in the fall, so I'm excited.
We're doing the transitional justice seminar.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm very excited. Can you expand on the ways in which faculty and students in the political science department might collaborate?
Sure. So this summer, I actually have an undergraduate student. She's an international relations major, not political science, and I can talk about the differences a little bit. But she's going to be working with me this summer, doing some research in support of my ongoing book project. I'm writing a book about transitional justice and post-conflict resolution and reconstruction. And she will also be helping me develop the syllabus for the seminar that Sydney will be taking in the fall, which is a comparative look at transitional justice institutions. And so that's something we're doing collaboratively, but it builds out of her interests in human rights in North Africa. Julia studied abroad in Morocco last year, and she did a really cool field-based research project while she was there that we're developing into an honors thesis in the fall. So there's sort of this nice alignment between her honors research, which started, I said it started in Morocco, but honestly, it probably started in my research methods class before she went to Morocco. But you know, her honors project overlaps really nicely with some intellectual interests of mine. So she's going to be helping to do this research. And I think just in general, it'll all be mutually reinforcing. Julia is also then applying for a Fulbright and as part of her post-grad plan, and I'll be supporting her through that process. So that's just one example, but students work as research assistants pretty often. I always have students who work as study table facilitators. So right now I'm teaching 2 large sections of Intro to Comparative Politics, and by large, I mean HWS large. So they have 30 students each,
people.
Which is not really that big in the grand scheme. But for each of those sections, I have a twice weekly study table that's run by a junior who basically has taken and succeeded in the class and kind of understands my expectations well. And she runs those study tables. And then I also have a writing colleague attached to each of those classes where the students help review drafts of written work and help students develop more sophisticated writing and research techniques. That's a standard feature of my classes, but a lot of my colleagues as well. And it's another way that students collaborate. And you might be thinking about like TAing or like, you know, the students are working for me, and they are, let me be clear, that is true. But also it's helping to generate ideas for what I'm going to write about in their letters of recommendation. So I've noticed that the students who've worked for me as writing colleagues or as peer tutors go on to get jobs in editing and publication work for NGOs, for think tanks, things like that. The students who've worked as peer facilitators or study table mentors often, if they go to graduate school, they might get a teaching assistantship because they've got this experience. So those are the kind of things. Liz Carlson, who graduated in December, she graduated a little bit early. She's teaching a summer session at Johns Hopkins this summer for high school students. That's a curriculum based on what she did is as a independent study with me in the fall. So all of this kind of overlap between the teaching, the research, and the student mentorship, I think comes together in some super productive ways.
Awesome, thank you. So political science is a really diverse subject at HWS, and we have a lot of students who are drawn to the major for a variety of reasons. I personally am a political theory concentration, so I focus primarily on past and present political thinkers, their bodies of work, and how their ideas can theoretically be implemented in communities. I've also had the opportunity to take classes in the 3 other subfields that we offer. So Professor Philby-Gada, could you speak about the curriculum and the courses and tracks that students can take within the major?
Sure. So we have actually 5 gateways to the political science major, which is a lot, right? We have 5 intro courses, which seems kind of crazy. And 2 of them are in political theory. One of them is Intro to Political Theory. One of them is Intro to Feminist Theory. And then we have Intro to Comparative Politics, which is what I teach, Intro to International Relations, and Intro to American Politics. So those are 5 different paths that someone with a general interest in politics might take. And coming into the major, we do expect that our students take 1 course in each of the 4 major subfields. And that's not really an onerous request, right? They reinforce each other. It's really common that I get students in their senior year taking their comparative politics distribution because they were so certain that they were interested in American politics. And then they realize that what we do in comparative is actually ask a lot of similar questions about how power is organized in different contexts in ways that are entirely interesting to people who want to understand America, because it helps them understand the different possibilities that exist. So I always hope that students will take intros earlier in their career rather than later, but there's no requirement. You just have to hit all 4 subfields as you go through. In addition to that, students craft, and this is one of the things I love about the political science major, students craft an individual concentration of 4 courses in the major, and they do that in consultation with their advisor. You don't concentrate in a subfield. You don't concentrate in American politics or comparative politics. You concentrate in a question. So Sydney, if I have more than 50 advisees, but I'm thinking that your concentration is contentious politics? Okay, so contentious politics can be everything from protests to political violence to elections, right? And so different classes that reflect dimensions of contentious politics might be in Sydney's concentration. Then there's the capstone sequence, and the capstone sequence is a 2-course end of your major. And we have a couple different ways that students can complete that, but it must include a seminar. And a seminar is a very small, intense, once a week for 3 hours, close reading of texts, writing a big research project at the end. And those are capped at 12 students. So you get a really intimate experience of education in that context. For those who are going to be going on to graduate school, it's a great preparation for that. But for those who are going to be going into public policy, it's also a great way to get used to the kind of collaborative work and mutual accountability that I think is a characteristic of a lot of postgrad work environments too. So that's the sort of arc of the curriculum, from intros to concentration to capstone sequence. And somewhere along there, more than 60% of political science majors go abroad. Those courses usually count somewhere in that concentration. Sometimes they don't. Depends on what program students choose. But Alexis, I know you were abroad this semester and had to come back like so many other people. Can you talk a little bit about where you were and how it was fitting in with what you were doing?
Sure. So I was at IES Berlin in Germany, and it was really, really awesome. The faculty both there and at HWS were really helpful in making sure that my classes over in Berlin would count toward my majors and minors at HWS. So I actually took, I'm taking Middle East, or Europe and the Middle East, which is on European and Middle Eastern politics and how they're affected or reinforced by one another, which I took Professor Gilbert Gatta's class on political violence, which was very Middle East centered, just because that's her area of expertise, which I really enjoyed, so I wanted to take more classes on that. And I am also taking a course called Politics of Gender, which talks about specifically Berlin and Germany in the 20th century and how policies implemented in the state of Germany were affecting the culture and the politics and the war, like World War II, during that time. So they're both really interesting, and the school, HWS, works really hard to make sure that you find a program that really fits with your major. We're one of the top schools for study abroad, so it's really important to administration, number one, so to administration and faculty, that you get an abroad experience that is fun and is a place that you want to visit, but that is also still keeping you focused on your area of study.
One of the things that we do that I love the most is faculty-led programs. So Alexis's program is not faculty-led, although it is part of the Blocker program, which is a great scholarship program that underwrites the students' opportunities to study at a number of German universities. And the cool thing about the Blocker is that most of the programs attract students from all over Europe. And so you learn a lot about the EU and the EU both as an idea and as a kind of lived reality of cultural integration. So I think that element's really cool. But our faculty-led programs are my personal favorite. These are courses that are designed and taught by HWS faculty explicitly with our curriculum in mind, right? So last summer I spent a month in Sikkim in the Himalayas, where my husband, who's also a professor in the political science department, taught a course on labor and identity politics in the Himalayas. And it was so fascinating, and we visited tea plantations and we learned all kinds. I mean, it was a great program, and students got a political science credit for it, and it fit really easily into the structure of the curriculum. I've taught a short-term program in Egypt on the political economy of development and authoritarianism, which was a lot of fun, and we had like 20 students for almost a month in Egypt. So those are the short-term programs, but they're also semester-long programs that are taught by our faculty as well, both faculty in political science and in other departments. Sid, do you have any questions?
Yeah, so one of the things that tends to be on the top of the minds of students as they enter college, and I know for myself especially this was the case, is what are some major themes that or career paths that people will take after graduation? Or do you see a majority of students pursuing graduate school or any specific type of job? So if you could just speak about that.
Sure. I think a lot of students think that they have to go to graduate school when they finish, and that's really not true. And I would also say in many senses not even advisable as a first step. That said, we do well in placing students who do apply, right? When I have students who want to go straight to graduate school, they're able to do so. The most common straight to grad school path for a political science major is usually law school. And that makes more sense than other kinds of graduate programs. But we routinely hear from alums that they are glad that they work for a few years to kind of narrow down a focus in terms of what they would need more training in their desired field. So Alexis was at Day on the Hill, and so let me say something about Day on the Hill. Day on the Hill is like it's not a day, so that's misleading. It's like 3 days in Washington, January. And it's jointly run by Career Services and the Political Science Department. And it's a networking and sort of informational event. So networking in the sense that there's a ton of alums who come and you meet them and they might have job openings. And so it is actually a practical networking thing. But also informational. We have panels of alums talking about how they got their first job, what types of work they do in various politically focused fields. And so that ranges from people working in NGOs, working in think tanks, working on the Hill for members of Congress, working in various federal agencies. This year, I think we had the Environmental Protection Agency and the U.S. Agency for International Development. We did a site visit to an alum who's a national coordinator for Amnesty International. She's also come back to campus and helped to recruit some students that way. So these are all the kinds of things that people do, and we have this annual event that's designed to introduce people. And as a co-director of that program, I've tried to prioritize bringing sophomores and seniors. So why sophomores are looking for internships, and it's good timing for them, right? They're either going to get an internship summer after sophomore year, or they're going to know what they need to do in the intervening year to be more competitive for that the following year. And then seniors obviously are getting ready to be on the job market. And one of the things that I love hearing from seniors at Day on the Hill is that some of them moved to DC with a job in hand and no apartment. And some of them moved to DC with an apartment and no job. And explaining to students in real detail, like how they've worked that out and how they've, put together the lives that they have, usually within 1 year, like usually these are young alums. We always have a young alum panel, especially to kind of give people the genuine information that they need. So I think that we do work with Career Services on that kind of thing. Locally, we also try to get students involved in the local community. Lots of great connections with like Legal Aid of the Finger Lakes, for example, always routinely employs political science students in internships, and sometimes entry-level positions as well. For sure, the different elected offices need campaign staff, need constituent service staff, and sometimes students do that as an internship for credit. If they're doing it as an internship for credit, they have a faculty advisor who might read, for example, a weekly journal of what they're doing and how it relates to what they've been studying. A lot of times they do it for money, not for credit. And we do have a guaranteed internship funding that makes that easier. There are some hoops that students have to jump through, right? Some trainings that you have to go through. Why? Because if we're sending you out there, not only are we sending you out there with some HWS cash to support that internship, but with an HWS name. And so we want to know that students have been adequately prepared in some of the professionalization skills that they need to succeed in those settings. So I don't think it's bad that there are these mandatory workshops if you want the guaranteed internship funding, but I am glad that we have it. I do think it makes it more accessible for a broader range of students to do internship work before they hit the job market. Oh, and I should say, we have an enormous number of students who apply for Fulbrights and the Peace Corps. Those are both really popular options, and we have a great placement record with both organizations.
Awesome. So I have one more question before we open up to the audience. I just want to remind anybody in the chat that you guys are welcome to submit questions that you have for either Professor Filbert-Yadav or Sydney and myself. If you have questions about what it's like more on the student aspect, if you want to know about classes or anything like that. But our last question, Professor Filbert-Yadav, how do you make the case for the value of a liberal arts education and a political science major in today's society?
So to some extent, like, I'm a bad person to ask because I drank the liberal arts Kool-Aid when I was an undergraduate, right? Like, I really embraced that idea, small classes, close relationships with faculty mentors. And I have not been disappointed by that as an adult. I have retained my relationships to my faculty, undergraduate mentors. And not just, yes, my undergrad advisor just followed me on Twitter, and that was pretty crazy. But we've been in touch over the years, and she's brought me back to campus to give talks, and those kind of things, those relationships really do endure. But so do relationships with classmates, and so do relationships with an alum network. The alum network at HWS is really extensive, and it's a real resource. But because this is such a small institution, people also really get to know each other and vouch for one another through that network. So it's not just like, oh yeah, you went to the University of Virginia too? So did I. Go whatever. I don't know what mascot they have, but I'm sure they have one. For us, it really is, you studied with so-and-so, well, let me give that professor a call and see what she has to say about you as a student before, and then the expectation is there that that faculty member will know you as a student and can speak to your character and can speak to your skills. So I think the closeness, the smallness of it is really important and significant. I kind of complained a few minutes ago that I have 50+ advisees. That's way on the high end of the spectrum in terms of the number of advisees that a faculty member might have, which is good news, right? It's not necessarily good news for me having a lot of advisees, but it's good news for you as a prospective student because you know that your faculty are going to know you really well. So I think that that's the biggest thing, is that we can really very individually tailor to students' educational needs. Right now in this disruption, things are tough. Things are tough for you guys. I don't have to tell you what it's looking like to do distance learning in this environment, but I can tell you that I have students in Greece, and I have students in Pakistan, and I have students in LA, and I have students in upstate New York, right? And I need to be able to reach all of them. And what that's meant is a combination of what's called asynchronous instruction that students can kind of schedule on their own time, and live stuff like this via Zoom, and videos of the live stuff if people couldn't make it. And then in some cases, I have students who don't have the internet connectivity to be able to do any of this. And we're doing a one-on-one reading questions and responses via slow email on an ongoing basis, and those students are still going to succeed in my class. They're not going to get the same experience as the students who've been able to access more of the materials, but they're going to get something close. And that's basically because individual faculty are working with individual students to teach them where they are. And I mean where they are in the literal sense of physically where they are, but also in the sort of meta sense of what people are really able to do right now. I hope that answered your question.
So I believe we had some questions come in. So Professor Philbrick-Yadab, are there any majors or minors that you commonly see being paired with political science?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure. I think the most common are probably economics, international relations, and religious studies, which, you know, Sid, you've got religious studies. And the reason for the international relations overlap, that's an interdisciplinary program that requires a couple of political science classes. So there's already some overlap there. For economics, you know, I think that our department is really strong in what's called political economy, both at the theoretical level and at the empirical level, meaning, you know, people who specialize in what the politics of economic policy making look like in specific countries, but also the ideas behind different types of political economic systems. We're really good at that. And so I think that that overlaps nicely with some of the strengths of our econ program. Entrepreneurial studies has exploded on campus in the past couple of years. That's an enormous, it's a minor only at this point. It's an enormous minor. Lots of political science majors choose it. And with religious studies, I don't think that there's necessarily any organic overlap. I just think religious studies has a great faculty. And so they attract people, that just happens, right? And Alexis, you are double majoring in English. English is also a really large major on campus. What we don't see as much is a political science and like natural sciences overlap, but it does happen occasionally. Tends to be a little bit more common between international relations and some of the natural sciences. So students who are interested in the environment in particular, I have a number of students who could major in environmental studies, but have instead done international relations and geoscience, which is a super powerful combination for people interested in the field of environmental policy and policymaking.
Awesome. So I know we talked a bit about Day on the Hill already, but are there any other career networking opportunities for political science majors that you want to talk about?
Sure. Well, we also, for people who are interested in economic policy in particular, I think that there's a program in New York City. So just like we go to Washington for Day on the Hill, the econ program plays a role in a similar type of program in New York City, and a fair number of political science majors go there. There's also one in Los Angeles that deals a little bit more with media, and there's some political science students who also double major in media and society, who might be interested in political communication in particular. May find that to be a helpful program. So the Career Services Office does a great job with these sort of travel-based programs that mobilize alumni networks in order to help students set up internships and first jobs. So I think of those as the primary things. We sometimes do an annual panel in political science on graduate programs, sort of helping students figure out how to navigate the admissions process. But to tell you the truth, graduate education is an additional expense that is not always entirely justifiable, I think. Like, especially people who are thinking about going on to get a PhD, like it's a kind of a dead end. I say that as someone who has, you know, obviously a professorship, but it's not what most people need to do the kind of work that they want to do. So I think we've sort of scaled back on that in more recent years, focused more on these networking events with alums in different locations.
Thank you. Alexis, I have a question for you. So why did you choose HWS?
Okay, biggest reason was honestly our education department, because I am studying to become an elementary education I'm in elementary education, so to teach younger students. But along with that, I mentioned I'm a public policy minor. What I hope to do in the long run is write education policy for the state of New York. But I did not think that I should be writing policy about something that I had not experienced and worked in myself. So that was a big reason. But we talked a bit about the small class sizes, how you get to know your professors really well, your classmates really well. I just liked the small school experience. I would not have done as well, I don't believe, in a large university. We also have a beautiful lake. If you haven't made it to Geneva to tour the school, it makes it so much harder to go to classes in August and May, but it's worth the struggle with that because it's beautiful and really nice to hang out on the weekends. But the professors that I met when I was touring the school, I think I'd actually already committed, but I'd gone back just because I loved it and I wanted to stay there for a night. I had gone to a few classes and the professors were so welcoming and so helpful. I dropped in on an English class and the professor kind of dropped everything that she was doing and like gave me a book and explained what they were learning about. It was just really nice and I like felt comfortable in the class despite easily being the youngest person there by 3 years because I started school when I was young. Professor Filbergatov is not my advisor, but I have emailed her like 5 or 6 times in the last 2 months, and she has always answered really quickly and been super helpful with what I needed. So just the relationships that you get to make with your teachers and your classmates are not something that you're going to find in a larger school, and I'm really glad that I chose the school that I did because you do get those personal connections. But
what about you, Sid?
For me, it's pretty much the same. I mean, I always knew I wanted to do political science or international relations or comparative politics of some sort. And I had done research into the program at the school, and I knew the professors were very highly regarded. And I had actually read some of specifically Professor Kevin Dunn's work for an AP class I did in high school. So I was putting pieces together, and I knew I wanted to go to a liberal arts school so that I could have a small class size and make those meaningful connections that I wouldn't otherwise get to make, say, at University of Florida or Florida State University. And I when I visited, I just walked on campus and it was the only school I'd been to where I was like, this is where I want to be. So, yeah.
What about all of you muted microphones out there? Does anybody have a specific question for me or for Sydney or Alexis? You can unmute yourself and just ask it directly.
Or if you're not comfortable asking questions in the chat, Sydney and I did include both of our emails. It's just our first last name at hws.edu. So if you want to reach out to one or both of us about anything specific, you can also do that after the meeting.
Yeah, please feel free, whatever you want.
We have nothing else to do, so we'll answer all your questions.
Oh,
okay, so I see a question from Lizzie about double majoring in political science and environmental studies. So the way it works across campus is that every major has to have 6 classes that count only for that major, and then the other classes can overlap with something else. So it's not at all hard. The political science major is only 10 courses, and we do offer environmental politics as well as a capstone seminar. Professor Dunn, who Sydney just mentioned, are you in that seminar right now?
No.
He's teaching a seminar on environmental change and global insecurity. That certainly is also counting in the environmental studies program. So the programs identify courses that serve each other well. There's a course in the environmental studies program on like environment and waste. I think it's environment, waste, and political change, something like that. There's someone who specializes in the political economy of garbage, which sounds awful, but is actually super significant and important for understanding the challenge of climate change. And students in the political science department frequently ask to count that class in the major. We allow students to count one course from any department on campus that they think really fits with their theme. You remember how I said there was a 4-course theme? So an environmental studies course could easily fit into that. We also have first-year seminars. There are a couple of first-year, every student takes a first-year seminar when they first arrive, but there are a couple that are about sustainability and sustainable living that are taught by environmental studies faculty and might be particularly interesting to you. Any other questions? Yes, I would be happy to talk about the distinction between political science and international relations. So generally speaking, international relations is a subfield of political science, but it's also at HWS an interdisciplinary program. As a subfield of political science, there are a few classes that have the word international relations or international relations of in the title, and those are in that subfield. So I sometimes teach an international politics of the Middle East class, which is different from my comparative politics of the Middle East class. Comparative politics of the Middle East, I look at the politics, the domestic politics of different countries in the region. And in international politics of the Middle East, I look at the relationship between states in the region as a whole. Okay, so generally speaking, that would be the sort of theoretical difference between them in political science. But the international relations major or program, as I said, it's interdisciplinary. It requires 2 political science courses and 2 econ courses as its core theory basis, but also a history course, an anthropology course, and then a thematic concentration and a regional concentration. So students get some depth around a single region, and they have to study a language for 4 semesters. So it's not super onerous, but 4 semesters of a language. And then also they study research methods and do a capstone seminar. So the way that I sometimes like to explain this to people is that I think the IR letter of recommendation writes itself, like a letter of recommendation for an IR major, because I can say, well, you've got this core theory, and then you know something about this question. That would be the thematic focus. And then you know something about how that question plays out in this region. You've got some language skills and some methods training that lets you do the independent research in the capstone sequence. So as a total, I love the design of the IR major. I was here, however, to sell you on the political science major. So let me tell you what I like about that by contrast. I do love the idea that the concentration in political science is self-driven by the students. So in IR, we have specific tracks and students have to choose a specific thematic track. And in political science, we don't have that. We're asking students to come up with a question that unifies the courses that they've taken. And I think that there's really something to be said for that too. It's also the case that in the IR major, if you're really interested in protest movements, let's say, you can take the class on protest movements and unions that's offered by Professor Ost, and I sometimes teach it too. But then you need to take your regional courses all in one region. In the political science major, you might take that protest movements class and then take Latin American politics, Middle East politics, African politics, politics of South Asia, and study how protest movements and unions function in those different regional contexts. So that's something that's possible in political science, but not really in the international relations major. So they do different things, and I think they do, both of them do the thing that they do quite well.
Just to add, if you are kind of stuck between if you want to do a political science or an IR, I recommend trying to get into intro to IR in the first 2 semesters, because my best friend is an IR major and has not taken intro to IR yet. She's a rising senior.
Fair. There was 1 year when we had a hard time offering enough sections of intro to IR.
Yeah.
The situation has resolved. And I don't think that problem will repeat itself.
No. But if you're trying to choose between the 2, you need 2 intros for political science anyway, but you definitely need intro to IR if you want to do IR. So just take that one, and then your first semester anyway, you'll have an opportunity to take classes that you may not have thought that you would take. Like I took an environmental studies course my first semester, which I never thought I would have taken. So that's a good point to start at if you're not sure what you want to do, is just to try IR. And then if you decide that you really don't like it, you have so much more time to change without having cost yourself any class space or time.
I would say if you're on the fence about IR versus political science, take Principles of Economics, because Principles of Economics is required for IR, and some people really don't like it, right? And the people who really don't like it won't ever have to do it again in political science. So that to me is also not, I wouldn't say a litmus test, but it's a way to figure out how much you're gonna like one major versus the other. Any other questions? We do not bite. Alexis, you want to wrap it up?
Sure. Okay. So that's all the time we have today. Thank you so much for joining us. If you have further questions or you'd like to get in touch with one of us later during your decision-making process, whether it's later today or in a few months down the road, we have our emails. And like I said before, Sydney and I both put our emails in the chat. And you can send us any questions that you might have. But thank you so much and best of luck on your final decision. We hope to see you in the fall.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you all.
And thanks to Sydney and Alexis for moderating. Great job.
Thanks.